All right, good morning, MycoWizards of the world. This is our third archival release. Even though Mike didn't want me to tell you that, I'm going to say it's numero tres. And it is on everything Shiitake cultivation. This is one of the longest standing studies in main cap and stem history that go as far back in two different directions as I can think. For cap and stem, we started with John Donahue's bags, fully maturating in terms of colonization, buckling, and browning in a bag. And Tyler over on the West Coast working at Cascadia was doing a similar thing. We switched to a 10-pound format over here. We stole Tyler from Alex at Cascadia. And we began to sort of go further and further down the shiitake rabbit hole. So we've learned a lot about the maturation, timing, temperature, and medium in which shiitake is best suited for among the different commercial strains available in order to get the best results, the highest yields, the largest quality of mushrooms. So this is one of the first videos that we put out via MycoWizards, really because it was the most comfortable thing that we understood and could articulate to an audience. So we're gonna release it on YouTube for free for the world. So hopefully if you're watching this video, you can gain some traction in your shiitake cultivation at home or at scale. Speaking of which, we've released a video today on combo pellets over and exclusively at MycoWizards.com. So if you want to learn everything there is about that whole side of the world and the possibilities of using combo pellets for shiitake production, check it out now only at MycoWizards.com. It's like an I over a T. Are those, did you put two T's because they're crosses?
Oh, wait. That would be proportional. There we go.
Oh my god, I'm falling.
Can you drop like little blood drops?
Like
Yeah.
It's bleeding?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All over the stories?
Right.
Okay.
All right, and then.
Sorry.
I feel like I should write upside down now.
You probably should.
Fix this. That's okay.
Erik, get it together.
Like strain history was kind of the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the big ones.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's do. Is it two I's? Why do you have two T's? Now you're
Shit.
shit.
Take.
Shit take. Shit take E.
Oh, you know what you're supposed to do? A little. Little.
Oh, and then the umlaut's over the what? The A.
Yeah, so it's shit.
Shiitake. Shiitake. Oh my god, we went too far.
All right.
Right, so we're going to go through the stories. We're going to go through the strain history. Our personal strain history. I don't give a shit what they're grown in 14 BC.
Right, don't know.
Don't know, don't care.
Old news.
And then production, right?
Yeah.
I
like
love
recipes.
I read like a child compared to you. You got like nice
product.
handwriting.
Right.
Oh, product. Jesus, I didn't even finish the word.
Profit. Okay. Right. So recipes, right?
Right.
Recipes and moisture content.
Moisture. It's so moist. Is that your favorite word?
It's cold and dry in here.
Just drink more beer.
Steam.
Louis Pasteur.
question.
That's a pretty great question. Incubation.
That's the big one.
I don't know why I wrote product.
Here we go. Okay. Fruiting. Fruiting. Induction.
Bud induction.
Bud induction.
Primordial bud induction, bro.
It's like David's great next band. Yeah.
Primordial bud induction. Yes. I just want to put this in like a high speed, time lapse thing. This is fantastic. Oh shit. Yield, baby, yield. This has been fun. Later.
All right.
Okay, cool. Should we say our names? Should we get into it, and then we'll properly examine this map?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to start with the spawn of Satan saying? You don't have it ready yet? Do you want to read it from your phone?
I can do that. Yeah.
All right. I think it's important that we start this out right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put my phone on flashlight. Nope. I mean disturb. Do not disturb. Also, my redneck husband and Jesus. How do you feel? How do you think Jesus feels about
the gays?
The gays.
I don't know. Is that in the Bible? They probably got stoned.
They probably did.
To death.
Yeah. The gays or the Jesus?
Well, Jesus probably wanted them stoned.
Oh, really? You think Jesus was a hater?
Hard telling. He seemed really nice. And I doubt he hated the gays, but I bet
it's possible. Oh my god, it's in a text thread?
Yeah. Well, that's on his old phone.
Let's give some context for this shenanigans.
Right. So we'll read from scripture to start here. From what our workshop title is the Necrosponicon.
The Necrosponicon, an intro to Man Cap and Stem's MycoWizards Deep Dives.
Particular case, the scribe, the prophet here, was one Zach St. John's.
Zach St. John's.
Spawn Psalm 121.1. The technique is aseptic. I shall not infect. It bringeth me to the clean cultures. It leadeth me to the sterile agars. Heat restores its purity. It leadeth me to the paths of axionicity for its own sake. Ye, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of mold, I will fear no contam, for thou art with me, thy tweezers and thy loops, they comfort me. Thou preparest a flowherd before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with isopropyl, my spray bottle runneth over.
Oh my god.
Surely science and logic shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the lab of the spawn forever.
Oh my god. This sounds like we're starting a cult.
Yeah, maybe.
A Shiitake cult.
So, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the topic at hand.
No, I guess not.
Indirectly.
Eric, do you want to start
spiritually?
Us off? Do you want to
sure thing, Tyler. Right. We're going to talk about shiitake, or as we like to call it, shituki.
Shituki?
With the umlauts, right?
What was that? Was it the Music Man? Shapoopy? Shapoopy.
Shapoopy, shapoopy, shapoopy.
We experts here.
We're not saying that's how you spell shiitake.
It's not far off.
It's close, but we're not going to actually tell you how to spell it.
Not going to change it.
It's too perfect. The umlauts, what's that shit above the E? The Spanish shit? Accent?
Yeah, I don't know if it's got a special name.
Accent?
But you go
That's
Shiitake.
Right.
All right,
cool.
Story time.
Sorry, yeah, we're gonna start here.
Tell me about an early memory with shiitake.
Oh man,
Something good.
I didn't realize shiitake is jizzed all over you when you open the bags.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody knows the shiitake goo,
I think people are making products out of that.
Are they?
I heard something, or maybe it was just a challenge of some dumb person.
No, it's the lion's mane piss.
That's what it was. Okay.
Whoever's doing that,
don't
drink the lion's mane piss.
Or the shiitake jizz.
I mean, I would pay probably somebody at our farm to do it.
Lion's mane piss.
I don't know how to cut it. Hey, can you cut it?
Sure, I'll cut it. I'm sick.
You know, I actually had this conversation. I told you about this with Damon and
He seems like he'd do it.
Kristen. I said no, it was Damon, Kristen, and Sam, and I explained to them what the challenge was: this drinking the lion's mane piss. Whoever made somebody do it on CMGN, and I said, would you do it? And they were like, well, like how much? And I was like, $50. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, man, no hesitation. Clearly, I'm a bad employer.
Yeah, this reminds me of hanging out in the alley with your friends when you were a teenager, and the one guy who had low enough standards that he would drink the bong water for $10.
Oh God,
Seen it.
I would never drink the bong water.
Seen it.
You seen somebody drink the bong water?
No.
Did they get high?
No. Or he probably was already high.
Oh, there you go.
So who knows?
All right, so my first shiitake story, I think, was trying to grow shiitakes. I didn't even know what a fucking shiitake was. I think I figured it out in Arizona, starting that first farm, because I called Aloha and I was like, yo, you got the straw, that shiitake straw strain, bro? Because that was the one. That was everywhere. That was like, if you searched it out.
8? Is that right?
Yeah, or 2009. So I don't know. Somewhere in there. Late 2000s.
Yeah.
Late, adolescent 2000s. But I ordered shiitake straw when I was out in Arizona. And then I never actually grew it out there. All I did was grow it out on plates. And I cut cubes out of the plates in front of the flow hood. And then basically put them in a sterile, sort of slant of water.
Right.
And then brought them back here on an airplane.
Just for a long time, just sitting there.
Nobody thought the water. Whoa. Nobody thought the whatever. Yeah, it was crazy. So have you ever done that submerge in water thing where you got your dish and then you slice that mother up like a pizza pie?
Yep.
And then you take these and you put them into
that's what when people call and ask about preserving cultures,
you're like
genetic stability without cryo.
Yeah.
From what I've seen and from what I've done and talking to more experienced mycological folks than myself, doing the distilled water preservation is kind of the next best thing to cryo. And it's the best thing in the case of the ones that you can't cryogenically store.
Is it?
Like everyone's favorite mushroom. Pink oyster.
The pink oyster. The yellow oyster.
And then, with a variety like shiitake, which is, it's pretty easy from what I've seen and testing the performance of a culture line that's X months old versus X more months old, pretty damn stable. So
Yeah,
It
well,
seems
you gotta
pretty
think
viable,
they
but-
kind of want like the hydration, so you're
Yeah.
just submerging them in a sterile vat.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, but that's my first one that I ever stored because I just made some plates. Actually, I think I made the plates in like a glove box.
Cool.
Weird to think about, but yeah. So I did that. Why? What was your first shiitake memory?
It was really like the predominant theme of working at Cascadia Mushrooms, because at the time it was easily 50% of the production there was shiitake,
Oh,
if not more.
True.
So that
Hi,
was like
Alex.
the bread and butter of what he's still doing, as far as I know.
Yeah, he's a huge shiitake guy. I remember seeing his
and
shiitake video
so-
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First thing that comes to mind is I definitely abused the free mushrooms privilege, being like poor and really liking shiitake. I think they're great.
Shiitake.
And I wonder if I was eating 5 pounds a week or something that I don't care to admit. Sorry, Alex.
It's been
shiitake.
statute of limitations is over.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Fucking thief.
But
I was talking to him today. Go
hey,
figure.
he said take free mushrooms.
Right.
Might have taken too much.
5 pounds a day.
Yeah, biking home.
God, if you ate that many shiitakes, your breath would just be like putrid
All that
shiitake.
garlic.
Oh, God.
Teriyaki sauce, olive oil.
Olive oil slathered on your skin.
Harvesting shiitake all day long. That's like, and yeah, just the reason I started wearing, if my memory is correct, the reason I started wearing primarily white t-shirts, cheap white t-shirts, was because you could buy them for like, $6 for $6.
Yeah.
And they would just be the sacrifice shirts for all the shiitake
Ugh.
juice. And, when you're cutting open whatever, hundreds and hundreds of blocks each day,
Yeah.
you're not going to be neat about it at
No,
that point.
no,
Next
no.
to a drain, and you just rip them open and just shit.
Does anybody
flies
use
everywhere.
that as like a walnut ink sort of dye? There's got to be somebody doing something stupid
Probably
out
do
there.
something.
Anybody? Bueller?
That's intriguing. Pretty good stain. It stays for a while.
It stays.
But
I've never gotten
just
a white shirt clean.
harvesting it, like I'd always try to, as much as possible, thread that needle of still harvesting fast while trying to get to them at the proper point, which I feel like is one of the most common things I see is people harvesting shiitakes at
Right.
like when they're a little too far gone. And yeah, there's more weight at that point, but their quality and their shelf life is terrible at that point.
Right.
But so I'd always be like trying to get a really keen eye for being able to tell which cap had the veil crack
yeah.
just enough that I was ready to
A
go.
little donko.
Right.
Right. That's not even. Is that legitimately donko?
It is now. It's just good. It's just
good.
It's just, but I do remember one specific time. I used to harvest solo on the weekends. I think it was on Sundays is what I did. And I remember one day it was, I want to say in the lead up to Christmas. So it's just a mushroom boom for the farm, and he's doing so many more hundreds of pounds each week than normal.
Everybody
and I'm
wants some
harvesting alone,
shiitakes.
and it's like an insane amount of shiitake. And I remember feeling like after harvesting for 8 hours and hundreds of shiitake poundage, getting to the end of the last row and then just looking and seeing all these caps that were buttons at the time that were now open, and just feeling like I was in this Kafka trap where I'd just be in a never-ending cycle of moving through the aisles, because at that point more would be ready, and by the time I finished, the next ones would be ready.
Did you get
Just-
shiitake lung out there? From that shit?
No, I never used a ventilator. None of that was like
respirator.
Yeah. Respirator. None of that was emphasized. The only thing I could, which is bad.
Oh yeah.
I didn't get any like respiratory issues from being in a fruit room all day. But I will say we'd always harvest the reishi outside, because
those
spores
bad.
are fucking virulent as hell. So
Right. I was gonna try.
but yeah, no, definitely use a respirator.
Hospital respirator,
Oh, okay, makes sense now.
ventilator,
Can you draw
COVID.
a gravestone?
I'm just gonna. Oh, well, I was gonna draw some, fine gentleman with his little toes out.
It's gotta have a man bun now to complete the look.
Oh, right. Like he's just like bloop, bloop, bloop.
Yep. Dropped out of college.
Like beep 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 beep, and then he dies, flatlined.
Right.
Anyways,
it wasn't worth it, dude.
It wasn't worth it to not put your respirator on, or you'll end up on a ventilator.
Loser.
Loser. No, but seriously, I think I remember harvesting 3782 for like a week, and everybody got spore lung. It was Mike, then it was Frank.
Yeah,
it was definitely me. I don't know if Mark ever got it, but
yeah,
that shit sucks.
Yeah.
It's like being a chain smoker for 10 years in 10 minutes.
Right.
You're like, it's terrible. Don't do it. Hi, Charlie. Okay. Yeah.
Jockey, still love them.
Yeah, I don't know. They're all right. I can get behind them.
Right.
Not bad. No, they're pretty good. I think the strain history is kind of funny. So let's go into the strain history.
So, right. In 900 AD.
Oh, right. It was 900 AD. No,
some
80? Yeah,
some smart fella smacked a log.
He did. There was a big old shiitake log, and it was fruit and shiitakes. And he was really drunk the fucking day before, so he'd beat his wife.
Off of plum wine.
Yeah, off of fucking brandy wine, dude. And yeah. So he was just like, he was hitting his shiitake log, and he came out, I don't know, a week later. That motherfucker fruited. This is bullshit, actually. Does smacking shit have anything
Sorry,
to do with
China.
shiitakes?
We got it wrong.
We got it wrong.
We got it wrong. That's not how it happened.
It's crazy.
Somebody smacked it.
Somebody smacked the tree. Well, correct me if you know a different story, right? But you smacked logs because they really didn't understand spores spreading through other logs.
Right. So,
or if they did, that's the only way in which they knew how to get them over there.
The story, which, who knows how much it's just like verbal history or whatever, but it makes sense, is they figured out they'd find a log in the wild that had shiitake on it naturally, and then they'd cut a log, put it in between, so on and so forth, and stagger them.
Yeah.
And then whack
fucking shit out of the log.
And then,
because they were like, oh.
And that's why we all have jobs.
They flagellated the log in the woods near the other logs.
Yeah, what have you done, bro?
Yeah, but what was the thought? Like, what was the brain thought? What were they like, if we, for some reason, there's voodoo and smashing the shit out of it.
Really kinky people.
Yeah, I guess so. Foot binding and all. Too soon? Shit, I don't know. Sorry if that was offensive.
The foot.
Smack it. What was that? Freddy got fingered?
Sorry. Now that we talked about strains.
Okay. Strains are interesting.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to claim to know anywhere remotely close to all the good shiitake strains out there. So apologies if your favorite is not talked about. We've only worked with so many.
Yeah, Jupiter, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
There's so many stupid fucking names. I do think the straw thing is funny, though, because that got me in trouble. Straw from Aloha. Those mushrooms are so few, except on some blocks, that I think it was Neil that actually recently went back to fruiting straw. Or at least he tried. Because it would give you, like, on a 5-pound block, these like fucking bangering mushrooms.
Just a couple big ones.
Yeah, or enough that you were like, that justified the yield. It was like, on a 5-pound block, it was like a pound. Awesome.
Yeah.
But then there'd be 8,000 other blocks with like no mushrooms or like one.
Right.
But I would sell them at like $8 a pound to fucking Rosemont and other places. And people were like, what is this shit? I even sold them to a Chinese restaurant who would only buy log-grown shiitakes because they were convinced through a distributor who brought them to them that they were log-grown shiitakes. They were not.
Clutch.
Clutch.
Fooled them.
Fooled him. So, anyways, straw was my first strain. Whatever. Did you know what you were growing at Cascadia?
Strain wise,
Yeah.
it was 321 from John Donahue and the Northwest Mycological Consultants.
Yeah.
That strain is still alive and well.
I wonder where 321 came from. He was like,
Don't know.
321,
And then there's
smack the shit out of the fucking log. You fuck.
I get it. That's patented.
I hope that
Yeah, and then there's 1, 2, 3. Too many numbers.
Is there 1, 2, 3?
Well,
No, that's Lambert.
That's
right?
what I mean, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's true.
They can't have done 122 tries.
No way. You think so?
Or it just, I think they're just like 1, 2, 3.
We should.
We
You need
should-
to call
we should
Casper
ask.
or hi Casper. We need to call because if you went through 3,782 strands,
That's exhaustive. Yeah.
this is the revelation though. Like
separate trial productions. I wouldn't put it past breeders. Like I did see the breeding protocol for Shiitake at Mycelia, and it is thorough.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they just finally, I think, are coming out with a new strain. More on that soon.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Slowly getting info out about it. But
they were like trying to cross 3782 and 3790, right? Or that's what they said.
That's what they said.
That's what they said. I don't know if I believe them, but I don't know. I went from straw to 3782. Straw being as inconsistent as a fucking like deadbeat dad at Daddy's Junkie Music.
And then 82 was the initial revolution.
Yeah, so 82 was a revolution. And the reason it was a revolution is because on any fucking block, you get 8 million fucking shiitakes.
Loaded AC.
It was crazy.
Mushroom.
And like low supplementation. This is before Master's Mix. This is before anything.
Super forgiving.
Yeah, so a 5-pound block would equal about 1+ pound of mushrooms, which was unfucking heard of in 2013, 14.
Right.
Like it just didn't happen.
Like, sawdust with like a little bit of wheat middlings or some
bran,
or some like whole grains. And
that's true. No, I think what we did, and we did it with both straw and 3782 was red oak and it was red wheat bran because that's all we could really get. But 3782 killed it, and I know that Aloha started with it, and then it came from Mycelia, but Aloha was the one that kind of get it out.
Spread it out here.
Yeah, it might have been TR's fault. I don't know. I don't know really. Oh no, you know what? I got 3782 from what is his name? Brian Simpson, who was working at this mushroom farm in Georgia. And I can't think of the name of the mushroom farm, but he was on the early CMGN, and I was like, what is that? And he sent it to me, and that's how we started the 3782 thing. I didn't even know.
Recollection. I think I remember talking to, maybe it's the same guy, maybe it's not, Erik Pearson in Florida. Hi, Erik.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about some like old-timer Georgia mushroom farmer.
Yeah,
his buddies with.
Well, it's not. Brian's not old. He's a pretty young cat, but he was doing it a long time, and then he stopped entirely. But that's where I got 3782 from, and they were growing it at that place in Georgia forever. I can't think. It has a great weird name, whatever that farm is. We'll just put it up here when I actually remember it. Thanks, Kelly. Cling. So. Straw to 3782 for.
Yeah, I didn't really finish 321.
Yeah, right.
So that strain, from what I recall, when I was super green at the time, but I did, I was in the production process for a lot of blocks of that.
Right.
I feel like I remember it being pretty average in its incubation speed. Pretty run of the mill, like 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Exceptionally good quality mushrooms. Very, very pretty. Really, really gourmet, but pretty low yielding.
So it was
at least in that context.
It was probably straw 321, 3782 in terms of like yield. And probably quality because that fucking strain, it fooled everybody. And I know every time I saw like Alex's shiitakes, I'd be like,
Yeah, they look really good once you have them all in a bin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all caps, and like
Right.
stems aren't edible. So
Yeah.
the weird part about that 3782 revelation was that the stems were practically edible because
Right.
the fucking mushrooms were so small.
Yeah, very fleshy. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's distinct differences, but coming by these strains was like all through trade. You never got it through like anybody other than, some homie or somebody
Right.
on Shroomery or Edna, I see you. You're gonna be
Yeah,
fine.
at that point there wasn't that middle ground between the big industrial scale spawn providers and the
No, if you called them
know,
up, they'd be like, no.
right.
Yeah.
There wasn't that middle ground with
No.
companies like us and others.
No, their Northspore wasn't there yet. We didn't do anything. Northwest Mycological was like barely. They didn't know what was in.
Right.
It's just the same strains. We could rattle on for days, but I think
from there, is there anything in between that and 3790 kind of taken over?
There was something. No, I guess that was it. I thought there was something.
There's probably something else in others.
Yeah, but basically
GR's Brazilian strains. I don't know anything about them really.
Yeah, no, it's those were kind of probably all made in a similar time period, but both of these came from Mycelia, and Mycelia is who I'm assuming bred them or got them. I don't
Yeah,
know,
it's a little bit ambiguous.
Did they?
I know they do plenty of breeding, and I wouldn't be surprised if I'm just going on a limb.
Yeah.
If they have like 9 shiitake strains. Most of them I think are not bred by them. I think there's a chance that 90 was.
Yeah,
but I'm not really sure. I have to ask them.
And they probably give you some ridiculous answer.
Yeah. 3790 is still, I think it's safe to say, by far the most popular, the most widely grown shiitake strain in not only North America but Europe as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah, 3790 is like the one, and the reason it's the one is it's slightly colder fruiting temperatures, slightly more consistent big mushrooms.
Yeah, better mushroom quality than 82.
Yeah, and 82 is just what did I do there? Yeah, 82 just had so many small ones. Occasionally you could get it to produce some beautiful mushrooms, but they're too small and they're just kind of like wimpy mushrooms.
Yeah, most of the time it was just a complete carpet of wafer thin.
Yeah, and for a long time, like you sacrificed quality for shiitakes for yields. And 3782 to 3790, that was trying to be configured. So a lot of us sort of put in a lot of effort into this sort of stuff in order to, determine what the best sort of methodology was to make sure that the yield and the quality were both there.
Right. Like I sum it up when I'm talking to people. 3782 is certainly the most forgiving strain, and it's kind of like a to use a cliche, like a training wheels shiitake strain, where you're going to be less likely to suffer complete crop loss or other problems if one or two of the variables that we'll get into momentarily are off. If your moisture content's a little off, if it gets a little hot in incubation or what have you, you'll still generally get something decent out of it. Where 90 is a little bit more finicky, but if you have those things dialed in, it's higher yielding, higher quality.
Yeah, it is. I guess this is a good place to start, and then we'll kind of go into the new wave later. But since we determined a lot of this stuff at that time, we can sort of walk through production having these two different ones in mind. So can I erase this? Does it make sense to erase it? All right, let's kill it. Let's erase this motherfucker. All right, cool. So I'm just going to give a breakdown once again of like what this sacrifice is. So usually smaller mushrooms or shiitakes.
Yeah, more of them.
Equal. Plentiful. Plentiful equals higher yield. That was the assumption for like forever.
Right.
3790 comes along and you get more medium to large, and you end up with less of them, but they're heavier, they're meatier, and thus you're trying to achieve like a moderate yield. And those were all sort of like configured on a 5-pound block. So 5-pound block pretty much got you this, like fucking crusty looking shiitake block that got you whatever. And yeah, it looks like that. Isn't that great? You
That's
like my
nice.
art?
It looks like 80% browned.
I'm not even gonna go there. That's like, we can send that out.
We can do better.
Can we send that out? Will the customer accept that?
Looks like a diaper.
Fuck
Like a diaper.
you. Fuck you and your diaper, man.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
mean.
good being the critic.
It's so mean. Okay, fine. So whatever, man. That's like 99%.
Okay, now you're at 90. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're getting somewhere.
5 pounds at, let's say, I think what we used to do is like 25% wheat mids.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And 75 red oak. So there's a lot of complications with this because what we were growing on was predominantly red oak, raw red oak,
Right.
and wheat mids of whatever. Wheat mids, middlings are just the shit end of the stick you get at a fucking,
Right. Yeah, sourcing
milk.
for that was always kind of variable.
Yeah.
Have to reach out to your Plan C source, and
Yeah.
quality's going to be different. The
Yeah.
nutrition's going to be different, and then the red oak obviously is depending on how old it is, and
Yeah.
it's going to be composted to a different degree. It's going to be
Yeah.
wet to a different degree.
Totally. Yeah, it's predominantly weird. And when we were doing all this and trying to justify these different, issues, simultaneously, we were ultra pasteurizing. Ultra past. I'm just gonna fucking write it like that. Oh yeah, that custard's sticky. It's like Jesus doesn't want to move.
He's tolerant.
He's tolerant. He's a tolerant guy.
Yeah, we already talked about this.
Tolerance.
He was nice.
He was nice. Wait, he liked the gays? First of all,
I think he
celebrate
did.
diversity.
I think he was misquoted.
Oh my god. Here we go. Here we go. It's all right. I celebrate your Christ.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyways. Where are we going with this?
Ultra pasteurization.
Okay, so here's some drama, right? I am in Arizona, wife's dying of cancer, trying to figure out how to convert to 10-pound blocks in a hospital.
Right.
That's how insane you have to be to farm mushrooms. Oh, that chemotherapy's fine. If we do 10 pounds instead of 5 pounds, I think we'll, are you still alive? Okay, we're good. That was dark. I took him down a dark path. You see that?
Memory lane.
Dark. So anyways, we took this away and essentially we made it a 10-pound block. We were not the first to do this. I think TR was probably the first person to really push it, as well as some other people. Like, I think before that, there were people doing 12-pound blocks.
Some people still do. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot, man. It was kind of crazy, but it was interesting. So the real issue with this became that this became even wider of an issue, because if you put a 10-pound block with 3782 ultra pasteurized with this makeup, you don't even get small mushrooms. You get goddamn tiny mushrooms.
Paper thin. Yeah.
Tiny. They're so small, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and
it's
there's like
infuriating.
thousands.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually when your yield actually goes down to like moderate.
Right.
All of a sudden you're
Right.
like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This isn't gonna work. So anyways, a lot of people switched to 37.2 from 37.82 to 37.90. The problem, and this is why I kind of did the color differential here, This guy can be fruited at like fucking 80 degrees.
Yeah, it's a huge variance. You could fruit it
Yeah.
from 50
to 80, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that will definitely change like the amount of nutrients, and the temperature at which you're fruiting will change the amount of mushrooms and
Oh yeah,
yield.
definitely. Yeah, in a major way.
In a huge way. 3790 on the other hand, and this is how crazy phenotypes are.
Yeah, it's a much
Colder.
more tight window. Yeah, to get it right.
Yeah, if you're like in that 50 to 60 range, you're happy. So call it 55, I guess.
Right.
And the mushrooms are that much better for it, and so on and so forth. So this is like the stage at which Cap and Stem sort of was trying to figure all this shit out.
Right. And then at that point, fast forwarding to getting this all figured out, which was a lot.
Yeah.
So when this went from moderate to
Yeah.
bigger, higher yield.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it went crazy. So this did crank up the heat, so to speak, and I think that 3790 became this what John Donahue refers to as a really hot strain. And
Right.
the reason why he calls it that is just because they run really hot. It's a vigorous, it's almost like an oyster, if you will. It buckles harder, it browns faster, or faster,
Yep.
gets juicier.
Yeah, it's these red-blooded American kind of strains, right? Where
Red-blooded American.
they,
Who's the
they're
character
risky.
from Gangs of New York?
They're a little wild, and
yeah.
unruly.
Yeah.
But to go back to that earlier point,
Bill the Butcher.
Profit.
Wait, what? Oh, right.
That was in there. Yeah.
Profit.
Yeah.
Profit matters. Profit's the entire fucking thing.
Yeah.
That's why 3790 or 3782 became still like the thing for a long time before people were like 3790 is possible if your room's not 85 fucking degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
You can do it.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of factors. So before we go into JC, Jesus Christ, or Jackie Chan,
Yeah, depending on your
pick your
worldview.
savior. Pick your fucking savior.
Yeah.
World? Really?
Yeah, or your theology. Are they the same?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Well, we got JC or this crazy ass KOM strain. What does KOM stand for?
Korean Om, meaning Om Foods.
Oh shit! Do we need to? Should we say that? I mean,
I don't know if we got to cut this out.
Nah, fuck it. We'll put it in there.
Yeah, our pal Sam at Om Foods in Texas.
Yeah, he sent it to us.
He talked this strain up big time to us and convinced us to give it a whirl, and it is definitely a winner. And probably in 1, 2, 3 years from now, it's going to be another flagship standard strain for farms. Just adding to the options for people.
Yeah. If anybody knows Sam's secret identity, keep it secret. He doesn't want anybody to know.
Right. Yeah, he's got a family.
Yeah. Does he?
I don't know.
Maybe. Oh my god. All right, so I think the first thing we should talk about is
substrate recipes. Yeah.
I like that you say recipe. I just don't. I suck at spelling recipe.
I think it's a little bit more tasteful
when you say composition.
No, I mean, it makes it sound.
All right.
Makes it sound, just like
it's like a theory.
Yeah, it's food. I mean, I guess you don't eat the substrate.
Did I spell it right?
You did.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Good. Oh, you forgot.
The umlauts or the that's what it was. Right. And umlauts. Anyways, substrate recipe. So let's just assume, because we're not trying to take you on a fucking history journey here, that you're using an XLSA bag and it's a 10-pound block. Because we can argue fucking semantics all day, and if your goddamn hands are fucking too goddamn tender to... Am I taking the Lord's name in vain too much?
No comment.
Okay.
What's your point?
I'm saying, like, if you're gonna, you should do this. This should be your thing. If it's not your thing, it's because you're using a better bag, probably. and you're
I mean, the
too
main-
skinny. You know,
the
you
main-
can't handle a 10-pound
This
block.
is the norm. It's whatever. It's the majority of farms at this point.
You ever see a girl walk and her shorts are too
Short.
and it's just like that's what I imagine. Two like 5-pound blocks. It's just one 10-pound block.
Mhm.
It's just like, you know. Okay. Anyways, I'm gonna
These
stop going on
thoughts emerged in Eric's brain at a tough time,
Yeah.
everyone. So
that. I did. Sorry, I just had to get it out there. So, all right, substrate recipe XLSA 10-pound block. Go.
okay.
What did you guys use at Cascadia?
Those were 5-pound blocks.
We're only talking in the fucking
We did-
metaphor.
Sorry, they're 10-pound blocks. I was wrong. Now, the one caveat I will say before we move on from this is there is an argument with this species specifically
yeah.
for a case for 5-pound blocks. If you're in a situation where you can't maintain consistent incubation temps really well, because their 5 pounds are much more forgiving as far as, managing all those biological variables during incubation.
Yeah,
more
for
so than a
sure.
10. It's definitely not just twice as hard. It's doing that for a 10. But
And we'll get
Yeah.
into that when
Yeah.
we talk about incubation. for
right.
sure.
So okay, what's it typically made out of? That's the
yeah,
right.
the ideal
Shiitake, despite what a lot of people are like attempting these days, prefers a lower supplementation rate than most other varieties, including oysters and everything you'd grow on Master's Mix. It's typically 20 to 30% supplement, and typically that's a supplement with it's usually a cereal grain, like it's wheat bran, it's wheat mids, or in other parts of the world, rice bran or what have you. But typically around here, we're talking wheat mids and wheat bran. 20 to 30%, somewhere in that range. That's pretty safe across the board. Remainder being sawdust. And people are surprising in that there are some farms growing shiitake on dug fir pellets and all sorts of stuff, but shiitake does mean oak mushroom, and it's the safest and most prudent strategy if you can access oak at a good price and reliably to lean towards oak or another hardwood.
Yeah, like a wild comparison coast to coast is that like we use oak because we have it, but
Right.
you guys used alder.
Yep.
Far West Fungi is another great example. Uses like a plethora of different hardwoods. You know, that's just what they can get, and they get so much of it that it can't be a single species. You know.
Yeah. And for
what
some
they
varieties, the difference in yield and quality and whatnot is negligible.
You did say it too. Shiitake literally means
oak mushroom.
Oak mushroom. So
if you can get oak, you should.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Well, you can still do okay with other woods. It's worth noting from what I know, if it's not a hardwood and it is a softwood, it seems like the people who do that best are using either like aged fir or pelletized softwoods. Yeah,
so for raw dust, there's a lot of strangeness that goes into that sort of category. If you compost your sawdust, if it's fresh or green, if it's aged, those are 3 different sort of categorical setups for sawdust and how people actually can store it, do store it. Do they add the supplements in as it's getting rained on and shit outside? Yeah, it's common. There's a million different things there. It got one of our friendly farms kicked out of CMGN for starting a fight about it. So it was a crazy little battle royale. But the reality is sawdust has varying moisture levels and tannic levels, especially if it's red oak. And that can cause a lot of chaos. So if you don't go through the sawdust fast enough, or you don't compost it or age it completely, you're gonna end up with like this kind of sine wave of yields. And it's 100% dependent upon where the sawdust is on that sort of spectrum of moisture content, age, carbon versus nitrogen, so many different things that it becomes like a major issue. But if it's cheap as fuck, like you should source it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, especially these days. It's not.
Yeah.
If you have a reliable source for any kind of raw material, definitely don't take that for granted.
Yeah, man. Everything's fucked up.
But yeah, shiitake likes a lower carbon to nitrogen ratio than other varieties. Something like oyster just doesn't give a shit and will rip through whatever you throw at it, and it can tolerate. If 3790 is a hot strain, as John Donahue would say,
Right.
Oysters are just at a whole different level.
Yeah.
If you go, there's a whole concept of kind of less is more with shiitakes, where you'll actually get lower yields, less consistency, less consistent browning, less reliable pinning if you go too hardcore with your supplements.
Yeah.
There are some people who are doing well, and it's kind of a by necessity thing, growing shiitake with soy hulls, but it's at pretty drastically reduced levels.
Yeah.
And if you have access to something that's a little bit more gentle, like wheat mids or bran,
yeah, we've all tried it, and the pellets from combo to let's say Doug fir to hardwood fuel pellets.
Right.
You can get away with these things, but like if that is soy based, you should probably cut it.
Pretty drastically.
Yeah. What you'll see is, it'll just be variable fruiting. And because shiitake block incubates for a really long time, it sort of manages components of the substrate composition differently. And it turns a lot of that into a secondary metabolite, which is what we were making fun of at the beginning. Shiitake-gism. It's crazy. Big Jim. Anyways, it's a thing. So
right.
If you're going to use combo pellets, you should cut it if they're soy-based or if they're 50-50 or master's mix. Why did Doug fir work, though? That's nice. Doug fir. God damn it. It's Herbie Hancock.
I don't know. I guess it's like, is there less resin than some other softwoods in it? Or
it could be a number of those things, but what I've determined from the way in which sawdust, fucking pine or otherwise aromatic or hardwood is processed is that you're taking so much of the moisture out of it and causing the pelletization factor to happen, which means it's being forced through something at an incredible rate of pressure and heat.
Right.
That it basically kills off a lot of the antifungal properties that would be in that.
That's interesting.
And then they can't really survive. Those antifungal properties are water-based at best, which is why they're such a sappy ass tree.
Yeah.
And when you kill all that stuff off, you're pretty much just creating you're making like an inert carbon.
Right. It's way more bioavailable.
Yeah. People are blown away by the fucking fact that you can use softwood pellets, and it's not really, there's no revelation there.
Yeah, at that point, it's just like a general concept that once something's been heat treated, once it's been pelletized, it's a whole different category of wood compared to that just native wild raw dust,
Yeah,
totally different animals.
Yeah, it's just like
that makes some sense, I guess.
Yeah,
with some sugar in there.
Yeah, yeah, that was just kind of funny. But yeah, so if you have hardwood fuel pellets, no matter if they're majority of them have softwoods and hardwoods in them, whatever, you're gonna get what you're gonna get. But I think that there's an advantage to some of these, and depending upon the situation and the supply chain, it's great. The reason why, like a hardwood fuel pellet or a combo pellet that's mids and dust would be better off for a shiitake substrate composition is primarily because of this, gradient that we were talking about, where you have a yield you're trying to achieve, and then the changes in that sawdust happening as the sawdust ages or is composted or whatever. That's a lot of work to deal with a substrate 33 tons of sawdust at a time. We did it. It's a bitch, man.
Yeah. It's a lot of maintenance.
Equipment. You gotta do all that stuff.
Yeah. You either gotta turn it or you gotta accept even deeper sine wave curves. From week to week.
Yeah, and if you're doing hundreds of these at a time, you might not see it. If you're moving through a pile really fast, you might only see it on shoulder seasons when sap content is low.
Right.
The point is, sawdust, raw sawdust, fight me on this. I dare you, anybody. Not really. I'm not a fighter. it does have a lot of variables, whereas pellets kind of create this nice consistency, despite them being a little bit more expensive.
All right, so
Moisture content.
moisture content, yeah. So shiitake's kind of interesting in that it likes a wetter block than, well, pretty much any other variety that is common. Whereas a lot of varieties you have in 63% moisture content, total moisture content.
Yeah, I was gonna say, majority are. We shoot for like 62 to 63.
Right.
I think why they like higher, especially because red oak can come in at like 80% moisture content, sawdust, which is crazy. So you actually have to add a fair amount of dry material.
And that wouldn't, just to flesh that out, that wouldn't necessarily hold true in the same degree as like if you had alder. Alder can't retain as much water as oak can.
Right. Oak.
Anywho,
fucking hold it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think the majority of species are in that 62, 63, but if you can get shiitake substrate up to, let's say, 64 to 65,
right,
you're going to be in a better position for yield.
And then from what I've read and seen,
complications to that.
Yeah, it's like there is a tipping point. This is kind of like what people see with some other varieties. Go up to like above 68 or so is when you're very likely to run into issues of just too much loose water and bacteria. So a little bit higher, it doesn't seem like much, but it makes a big difference. And let's see what comes to mind. I mean, part of that is over an incredibly long incubation timeline. It is going to desiccate. It is going to off gas. It's going to lose a little bit of its water content over time. So you're trying to buffer against that partially.
Well, and something, I mean, it's losing a ton of vapor through the fucking patch alone. Yeah. So be careful how high of a filtration, rate you have. You want enough, but we'll go into that. We're not there yet. The one thing Neil, the mighty Neil, said about KOM was it's really forgiving in terms of moisture content. So you can actually have less moisture content and get pretty sufficient yields. But simultaneously, if you have too much moisture content, and you get this sort of anaerobic shit and only some popcorning and browning towards the top of the block, this is like a popover or a muffin. I'm hungry. Anyways, this area will actually form mushrooms. And he, I think, verbatim said you can just slough this bacterial bullshit right off the block.
Right. Yeah.
So that's interesting, about that strain, because other strains, take 3780 or 3790 and do the same thing. If you get your moisture content too high, above this sort of range, and you can't force hydrate the stuff, you get this sort of sloshy block with some buckling and browning towards the top half, you might get a mushroom. But overall, that organism is like, fuck you.
Get out. Yep.
Yeah. So just something to consider. When you're trying to get like 64 to 65% moisture content, you really have to take into consideration the next step in all this, and that is whether you're pasteurizing or sterilizing. So it's a complicated question. I don't know how we want to really like the general thinking is that shiitake is one of the varieties, and there's only so many varieties like this among the ones that we all grow, that does better with sterilization than ultra pasteurization. And then there's this ambiguous middle ground that Erik's writing out right now, which is the interesting part. That's kind of an unknown that, us and other farms are trying to sort out. There's this funny. Okay, so let's just categorize these things. Like, this is
right. So
steam going into a box,
no pressure.
Yeah, the most you can get it up to at sea level is 212 Fahrenheit.
Right, and that's the threshold where you wouldn't require pressure to go beyond that point.
Right, and you couldn't build pressure. I mean, there's a lot of people like building containers that build a little bit of pressure. Please don't do that. It's pretty fucking scary. And then you have 15 psi, which is kind of it's 1 bar
Right.
for the metrics of sterilization.
250
yeah,
Fahrenheit.
121.
121.1.
121 C. The time at which you expose these things, qualitatively, it's like, you want the internal temp of the block for, let's say, 5 to 7. No, it's more like
A plateau is more like 2 to 4,
yeah,
right?
2 to 4 hours. I'm sorry, 2 to 4 hours. And that's the internal temperature with a probe, thermocouple.
And the
so on
core
and so
of
forth.
your hardest to heat block, it's like
Yeah.
your baseline there.
Yeah, and for this, you want the internal pressure temp. So let's call it this right here for about 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, 35 minutes is the general rule of thumb with mushrooms specifically.
Yeah, and that's something we can go into in a separate episode
Yeah.
between all these things, but it's worth bringing up because shiitake is fucking weird. At some point or another, TR specifically, Earth Angel is having a lot of issues with overcooking. He wasn't alone. A lot of these people with giant industrial autoclaves are like just fucking shit, murder
Roast it,
everything. Yeah. And what that does is creates a lot of caramelization, a lot of different other cooking reactions, which are detrimental to the actual organism being able to eat the substrate and then produce mushrooms. So what he did, and what a few other farms are doing, like quite a bit actually, is they have their pressure vessel and they'll actually get the internals of their vessel up to 15 psi or higher. So that's their vessel sort of pressure. And then the internal of the substrate, they'll get up to 200 to 212, whatever their sort of boiling point is.
Still pretty much the same internal temp as this.
Yeah. So they're using this ultra pasteurization, but they're using pressure.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that produces a pretty goddamn efficient fucking shiitake block.
Yeah.
Consistently,
Part of the idea with this too is, from that space between 212 or even the baseline pasteurization at 160 all the way up to 250.
Yeah.
You're killing off a higher and higher percentage of life on your way to here.
Yeah.
And then you've killed everything except prions.
Yeah. Well, you're not killing in here is majority bacteria.
Right.
So.
And so that's why, if you have other variables slightly off, like for example, too much moisture, you might have less consequences if it's a sterilized growing medium than if it's a pasteurized one, because there's more microbiota, there's more bacteria still surviving this process than this process.
Yeah, so for some reason this has really helped with a lot of people with like old canning retorts or inefficient boilers or whatever the fuck the issue may be. And that's kind of what they turn to, especially if time is an issue. A lot of people will basically bring their containers or their pressure vessels up to 15 psi, make sure their internals get to 200, cut the fucking boiler off, and let it sit overnight.
Yeah, if it's got a good seal, good hermetically, seal
Yeah.
overnight. It takes a long time to drop from that threshold if there's no other activity forcing the pressure down.
Right, you got a point, and this is another thing we'll go into in a different episode about all this bullshit. But yeah, if you're sucking in, if this wasn't pressurized, you just have ultra pasteurization. If you try to cool down in there, you just end up with a fuck ton of contaminated blocks.
Yeah.
But this pressure at that temperature and level of sterility, it's kind of there. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's something that's I don't think you're going to hear too many people talking about.
It doesn't really have a name per se. It's just this kind of informal thing that a few farms have figured out, and it's working really well. It doesn't just apply to shiitake too. There's a lot of these farms are just doing this as their normal run.
Yeah, because it's the in between these like high test pressure cookers. Like
and then they're not stuck in that situation of pulling your racks at 2 a.m. or whatever.
Right.
If you got a good seal.
Some people like sleep, I don't. Okay, so once again, if you're ultra pasteurizing, you need to pull these blocks out into a lab let them cool down until they're below 100 Fahrenheit, and then inoculate them pretty swiftly. If you're sterilizing, they can sit for a little longer. Quasi sterilizing, I don't know. I have no fucking idea actually. So
probably just treat it like pasteurized at that point.
yeah, knock it as soon as it's below 100.
Yeah.
Or 90 or whatever.
Yeah, preferably room temp, but 96 I think is like the precise one. But yeah, that's like, anything below 90 is pretty safe, and you don't have to even think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything we miss at the front end of this with substrate? And
let's think back. I just wanted to sit back. Maybe another correct posture. Need another one?
No.
Fucking tall boys.
Considering that this conversation is totally interdependent with the substrate conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
And tie in how like different scenarios like we did earlier,
yeah.
Like for example, if you are going whole hog and trying to grow shiitake on 30% soy on a 10-pound block, this is what you have to keep in mind to not get royally fucked.
You guys do CrossFit?
You can cross fuck off.
Cross part.
Right.
If you're doing a more smooth and steady 10-pound block with mids, this is the normal protocol,
Yeah, so the protocols are kind of specific to the three things that shiitake blocks go through, right?
Right.
So the individual protocols for like small block, large block, higher supplemented
hot
block, right? Yeah. Hot blocks. That all comes down to initial run. Sometimes I just don't trust myself. Initial run, buckling, which is different than fucking popcorning. Let's just get that out of the fucking way now. Popcorning happens when basically popcorning or blistering. Popcorning / blistering happens when the substrate temperature is too rampantly up and down. So it's not consistent enough. So we'll get into that. But usually it goes your initial spawn run. You got this fully colonized, beautifully fucking white block.
Yep. And that's, worth pointing out. It's not that much slower than any other variety.
No, man.
It colonizes and you're pretty safe from like thorough contamination.
Yeah.
In 2-3 weeks.
Yeah. And that's a pretty hot stage, I will say that. This is when it's producing the most CO2, the most sort of, I don't know, temperature flux, because it's just ramping into eating the substrate up. As soon as it's fully colonized, this is about, let's call this this is like 2 weeks.
Yeah. 2 weeks and change.
Then buckling occurs when all of a sudden you'll start to see like the outsides of your bag change texturally, and you'll see it in a few spots where you'll see cracks and stuff.
You'll see little signs before it subsumes the whole block.
Yeah. Cracks,
canyons. It depends on the strain.
Over. Yeah. Basically just gets texturized.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that happens in this like 3 to 6 week area, because it kind of overlaps. Okay, let's do week.
It's like 2 to 3 at the utmost, right?
Yeah. Weeks 3 to 6, I should say. It's probably weeks 3 to 5, something like that. Then you have browning, which occurs after this thing is fully buckled. And actually, the buckles kind of die back a little bit. They get less like insane.
Yep.
A little more like flat and textured. They're not like volcanic eruptions.
Right.
And then browning will start to like creep in, especially where like the crevices are, until this thing has basically fully browned all the way. And when we mean brown, man, it's like a gross golden shit brown, And this is the only species, I think, on the goddamn fucking face of the earth that does this. It's the weirdest thing. I don't really understand why it does this, other than understanding what the things are that trigger this. So this is week 5 through 12, sometimes 13.
Yeah, it's variable. You
Yeah.
have some leeway there.
Yeah, and this is there's morphological changing as this browns. So buckling changes, browning changes a little bit, but more than anything, these 3 stages happen over the course of between 6 now and 13 weeks.
Right.
Obviously, the faster you do it, the better. But basically, those are the 3 changes that are happening. Colonization doesn't need anything more than the proper temperature and CO2 range. So for a 10-pound block, we're going to call this 66 Fahrenheit. Buckling, same sort of thing. It basically just needs temp at 66, and then it needs adequate airflow, so spaces between every single block.
Yeah.
Space breaks out heat, heat pockets, breaks heat pockets. So once those heat pockets are basically broken, the buckling can happen on all sides of the block, which is really important because that's basically mapping out where all the primordia are going to form.
Right. Yeah. If a lot of people have probably seen, if you accidentally had 2 blocks sandwiched against each other, that point where they're touching is not going to buckle. If it doesn't buckle, you're not going to get mushrooms out of that spot either.
Yeah.
Straight up.
So I'm going to go back to the importance of these things. Just so this is going to be temp. This is going to be temp and airflow.
Mm-hmm.
This is temp, airflow, as well as light. No matter what anybody says, browning is entirely dependent upon motherfucking light. If you don't have light, you are not going to have a fully brown block, no matter what. If you incubate in the dark, anything like that. So, and you need a sufficient amount of light. This is why, as much as airflow is important, light is simultaneously important for both of these things, so that you don't have to move the blocks. So you want these 3 things to be able to happen to all sides of the block. Yeah.
Right.
Here. Yeah, that's the basic. I'm just trying to lay out that basic.
Right. Yeah. Fundamental stages. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Erik said, there's a lot of overlap between these 2 stages where you might see a portion of the block that started buckling first that's already starting to show signs of browning, while another part of the block is just starting to buckle. That's not that unusual, and it's not that problematic.
No, for sure not. One of the things that's sort of important to maintain. Oh, I must have gotten beer on that marker. So sad. I think we can fix it. Shit balls. Thanks, babe. Good grief. Temp. It's kind of like a 3D effect. And CO2. Those 2 things are directly correlated with one another, and something a lot of farms don't take into consideration is having an exhaust in your incubation to control CO2. You don't want it to go over 5,000 parts per million, because you'll get dizzy and fucked up. And you really want, for a 10-pound block, let's say this is 10-pound incubations for right now, you want 66. And the reason you want 66 on a 10-pound block is because if you have anything higher than that, the differential from the inside of the block to the outside of the block is something like 5 to 6 degrees.
It can be as much as 8.
Yeah.
And it's really high at the transitionary stages. From what I've seen, there's spikes in metabolic activity and the internal temp as a result in these transitionary phases between these, especially at the beginning, where at the end of the spawn run, when it's finishing and consolidating its colonization, that's when there's a huge temp spike.
Yeah.
And if that gets too high, you can compromise everything down the line, even if it doesn't really show any noticeable signs initially.
Yeah, so these things modulate in that sense too, like you're saying. So they imply one another. Like higher the temp, higher the metabolic activity, higher the CO2 production.
It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
They're all feeding into each other.
Yeah, and if you try to fix the CO2 by lowering the temp, you shock the block, fruits form.
Yeah.
Shocking is a huge thing when it comes down to shiitakes in particular, especially because of this long ass incubation period. So 66 keeps that differential down. Space for adequate airflow and light all sort of have these contributing factors that really will, get a block to fully brown and be ready for fruiting. Refrigeration is sort of the next step after this that can sort of elongate as well as shock, so that you're not having to fruit all these things all at once. And I will say, I've seen blocks just get browner. People can leave them on the racks for like
if you have a really stable circumstance, you can stretch this to a remarkable degree.
Popcorning and blistering too. Something to consider is like temp. If your temp is going from 60 at night to 80 during the day, internally, externally, it doesn't really matter. Even if it's a 5-degree differential, this sort of ebbing and flowing will cause the buckling to sort of get these air pockets to form underneath them. When those air pockets form, you'll basically end up with popcorning or blistering. And basically it is just like a blister you pull off your finger or something. All that popcorning or buckling was done for nothing because it won't brown. And it's sort of like, it's sort of like gets to a stage and then has to fall back. And you won't know until it browns. And then you go to take it out of the bag and that skin just like sloughs off.
Yeah.
Fuck. Yeah. So temperature, maintain it at that 66. CO2, I mean, the hope here is that you're in the like 2500 range. That's the ideal. Even if inside of the bag it's a lot higher, this is just what your ventilation should be set at. Let's say this is a 5-pound block.
And a lot of this changes.
Yeah, so this is a situation
it's worth pointing out right now that like when we're talking about 66 as that beautiful set point for 10-pound blocks, really what that's based off of is what are the ideal internal temps. That's the thing that actually matters. Your ambient temp only matters insofar as it affects the internal temp. And so with 5-pound blocks, it's different because it's going to be producing a different amount of heat, much less heat. And so you have a lot more leeway with 5-pound blocks. You can still incubate them just fine in pretty cool conditions, but they're going to be radically slower. Your initial run might be 2 to 3 rather than 1 to 2 if you're incubating in 60 degrees and so forth. But with 5-pound blocks, that spike that we were talking about is a little bit less severe. So you can get away with ambient temps in your incubation that are in the upper 60s or 70 degrees and still maintain a healthy internal environment for that shiitake mycelium.
Yeah, so if you're in that 68-degree range, it just means that for a 5-pound block, like the internal temperature, maybe 71, 72, 68 out here.
Right.
If this were an example of like a 10-pound block, because there's double the mass inside of this. And that really has to do with the shape, the size, and how much insulatory factors are at play, as well as the biological activity of the block. That's why it's not just like a double.
It can be a lot more. If it was like if it was shaped like a grinder or something, a block or a log, it'd be different. It'd be more forgiving because it's able to discharge heat way easier. It's more surface area. When you're talking about the same basic shape, just fatter, it's not gonna. It has much less surface area to work with, and so it can get wicked hot.
Yeah, and if it's this difference of like fucking 9 degrees or something like that, it's significant, and that can happen if your CO2 gets too high. So the goal really is to sort of keep this in that sort of 74 or 75 range internally for these two stages. It'll slow down once it starts to brown.
Right.
The activity isn't like erupting like it's doing all the buckling. It actually calms down quite a bit. What you don't want to happen, and that's why this whole thing is important, is this takes this many weeks. If your temperature at this point is actually too high, strains like 3790, 3782 as well will get to the point where they will buckle, they will brown, and then you'll take them out of the bag to fruit and they won't form one mushroom. They're just like, they're duds. They're shit.
Yep.
And that's the difference between a shit take and a shiitake. Get it? All that
No, we gotta splice in a. We'll have like just one shiitake block.
Yeah.
And we'll do the walk around the corner and
the
shit
other-
take, and then we'll
shit take versus shit take. Exactly. Yeah. Speed, is also a factor here. Like, not to a crazy degree, but if you have a 5-pound block, this is always going to be like the 1 to 2 reek range. This is going to be probably 3 to 4, and this is probably going to be maybe 5 to 8, somewhere in there.
Right.
Sometimes as long as 10, but it just really depends upon how adequately you can control these 3 metrics inside of your incubation system.
Yeah.
Incubation is a complicated environment.
And the key, if it's not clear right now, is stability with these environmental factors in incubation. That's really like the most important thing here. You can have stable temps, but if you get to a point where you start having fluctuating temps when you're browning, your whole crop can be compromised. You can have parts of it trying to pin, parts of it that just stop browning altogether and are more or less mostly white buckled blocks.
Yeah.
And some that are fine. And then it turns into a nightmare where you're picking through these huge crops trying to find the winners from the duds.
Yeah, and that's a real bitch if you're selling blocks. Trust me. Racks in particular are kind of interesting. A lot of people stuff racks. What we actually use are those pallet racks. So usually they're like 48 inches across, and let's say they're like 10 feet tall. And you basically just want to leave enough room so that, this is your first block or bag. This is your second, this is your third, this is your fourth. However many you can fit across there. I think we do 5. We just want to make sure that, adequate airflow as well as light can sort of access all the stuff from all sides. Yeah. And you got your hallway, on both sides. So if you run lights down here, if you have enough up high, whatever it is, this is just really important to keep in mind. If you're trying to stuff blocks into an environment, you're going to run into fucking more issues than you care to.
Yeah, you're going to get less out of it than you would if you had a lower percentage of blocks in the same space.
Yep.
Just because they're healthy.
Yeah. Rolling racks, you see that a lot too, because, nobody makes an ideal rolling rack size. And people stuff rolling racks to a corner. It's not ideal by any means. The one thing I'll mention for incubation, and it's important if you're going to do a ton of shiitakes, and even if you're not, stick to 5-pounders, I guess. But HVAC systems we'll go into in an incubation episode. But a traditional HVAC system will keep a room at like 68 to maybe 65 if you really push it. But the energy output really wants it to sort of stay at like 72 in Maine and most moderate climates. And this is just, your standard unit outside. It has a return duct. And this is your incubation. And basically air is generated in here that's cool, whips into your incubation, comes back, goes back, so on and so forth. That really, traditional HVAC system is great for a lot of environments, especially small ones. But the bigger you get, let's say you have 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square feet, ideally what you want to do is use the, a reefer cooler basically, which is comprised of an evaporative cooler and a condenser compressor. And this is basically outside of your building, compressor. And this is inside of your building, and all it is coolant lines that go back and forth. There's this radiant that runs behind these fans, and these fans blast a ton of air. And if you have these in your incubation, you can get your temperature down to 35 if you wanted to. They're meant for freezing and cooling, depending upon the type of coolant and the charge and so on and so forth. But the fact that these throw so much air allows you to take care of your second really important thing, which is that airflow issue. And that's the hardest one to figure out without putting a ton of fans in your incubation room, which we've done.
Right. Yeah. You have to have even movement, especially even if the blocks are spaced out. The interior of a rack or a rolling rack it's always going to be the hardest place for you to move that air through. So you'd have sufficient airflow. I have seen examples where it's too much, and it's like a lab setting where it's just like almost like it's positive pressure just gushing out. And I think from what I've seen, I think that impacts things like buckling adversely. But there's totally just a commonality there where if you're able to have enough airflow where you're maintaining consistent temp, consistent CO2 levels, then all these different biological stages should be okay.
Yeah. So you kind of know your shiitake block is done. I know you mentioned like a percentage, but it's kind of funny to think about. Shiitake blocks as a percentage.
Right.
But a lot of people don't know this are green and just start getting into growing. Once this thing is like softly buckled, it's been quite a few weeks, and your block's pretty much brown. You can look at it and like with your eye judge that it's about, this is like 10% brown, and then 20, 30, 40, 50. I wouldn't put anything in a fruiting room from the majority of these strains until they're like 80?
75 at the least.
80%.
There's a general rule of thumb, and obviously there's anomalies to this, but just as a general rule of thumb, if you're working with a given strain, sure, it might have certain inherent qualities. Like 82 might have a tendency towards smaller fruits and lots of them and all that sort of thing. But there's a general rule of thumb where if you fruit a block at a earlier stage of browning, and not too early, but like 75-80% or so, you'll tend to get less mushrooms, but they'll be bigger relative to the norm for that strain. And then if you let it get on the other end of the spectrum, 120% brown, it's wicked old, you'll get more mushrooms, sometimes a higher yield, and they'll be smaller. Relative for that strain again. That's just a good rule of thumb to go with. So once you get to a certain point of browning, at 75-80% threshold, then you can make a judgment call based off of how urgent are my needs, my orders, deadlines, etc. What kind of mushrooms am I going for? What kind of yields makes financial sense, fiscal sense.
Don't listen to NPR for 4 days ago. You'll think of the word fiscal differently. Anyways, side cut, just so everyone's aware who has never fruited shiitakes, that browning and that, buckling is basically this like leather skin that, wraps around the entirety of the block. You cut a block directly in half, you're just going to see, like white mycelium. So that browning and buckling is really only happening because of airflow, temperature, and light. Like we said, those are the things that pointed out. Those are the contributing factors. That's a good thing because what it's doing is it's creating its own plastic skin, if you will, to allow mushrooms to fruit from all over the block, unlike the majority of other species that won't do that.
Right, for sure.
And mushrooms are pulling, the majority of their fruit production weight from the actual substrate. They're not getting it from an environmental factor. They're not coming in from fruiting room conditions or anything like that.
Right.
They're just sucking it out of the block and forming a mushroom with it.
Yeah, that's the cosmetics on the outside.
Yeah.
Right, ultimately. What would you say to get a little bit more nuanced with the light piece?
Yeah. How much light depth?
How much how much is insufficient, how much is too much.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see on all sides of the block, there's like
even if it's faint.
Yeah, the Far East tradition is like getting far more into like red spectrum lights.
Right, way more precise.
Yeah, and red spectrum lights are great for, incubation. Cool spectrum, it's fall,
Right.
This is just following nature.
Yep.
I get that for sure. But you just want to be able to see. Like, mostly if you look into the center of a rack and you can't see light in there and it's too dark and you're like, you couldn't spot contamination, you don't have enough light.
Right.
Ideally, I always just suggest like 6500 Kelvin all spectrum light. And that really helps to just alleviate, any issues you're going to have, because stratification will come in the form of, heat, as well as light. So the light will be stronger up top and the dark will be, worse. So air movement really helps with the heat side, and light, you just have to get more lights or have them strategically positioned in your aisle so that they're pointing, inwards.
Getting enough access. Yeah.
And that's really helpful in regards to like setting up incubation spaces, which is why you want aisles. It's why you want lights here, lights here, lights here, so they can actually like shine on down.
Yeah, and that can be, these variables can be the difference between having a crop that's progressing evenly for the most part, and crops where even if they are healthy, they're just at very different stages of development.
Yeah.
A lot of farms have probably seen that, if there is insufficient light or airflow, too much CO2, too much heat, whatever, the core of the center of a rack might be like a week behind the rest of it, because the outer edges are getting light.
Yeah, or the top buckles faster because it's hotter, but then the bottom browns, faster, or the top browns faster because it's got more light.
Yeah,
there's so many different strange little anomalies. So homogeneous everything.
Yeah, but again, if the nice part is once you've gotten close to the end of the whole incubation timeline, once you get to that 75, 80-ish range, then you can tolerate some inconsistency where most of your crop's at whatever 90% browned. You have whatever 10% of it that's less than that. It's okay, fruit them all. You'll get slightly different results, but it's all going to be a wash anyways once you're just slicing all those caps off.
Once you're slinging fucking blocks, slinging them, slinging mushrooms.
You want to talk about what can like extreme cases of what can go wrong before just briefly here?
Yeah,
because that's people want to know that stuff.
Yeah, I think duds and contamination are key. Like anaerobic bacteria, like especially if the temperature gets too high, is just gonna fuck you over, and you're gonna end up with duds. So it's probably what I experienced with like straw way back when.
Right.
It was just the fact that we probably had really inconsistent incubation temperatures. Didn't really think about it. Had weird light coming into one area of our incubation room and not the other. And if one block costs you a few bucks to make, and you're trying to get X amount to yield off of it, you're not going to get any mushrooms if you fuck this up. Like none.
Right.
That's pretty detrimental. If HVACs go down, you need to have some sort of equivalent to get air out of the building and fresh air into the building, even if it's slightly warmer.
Definitely need to move quick in those moments, because the temp will build quickly. If your room's dense, regardless of how big, how many blocks are in the room, if it's packed dense, as most of us seek to do, you'll be amazed at how quickly that room will get to intolerably hot conditions, and that can compromise a lot of your blocks, not just shiitake, but especially shiitake.
Yeah, that's true. Shiitake are always going to be the first ones to go. They're the least lenient until KLM. I'm excited to experiment with this.
Yeah, we'll see over time. One last thing about what can go wrong, because I think it's pertinent to right now. There's a lot of farms that are doing this, because mids are so hard to get,
Yeah.
is people growing it on a reduced soy substrate. It can work. It can work really well. There's some cases of farms that are getting amazing yields and good quality and fast growth and all that, but it's like what we talked about. It's a hot block, you know. You got to really make sure that you have all those variables dialed in.
Yeah.
And it's just that much more unstable, where if you do get that, you know, spike in midday in August or whatever, where it goes from 66 to 70, that can be enough to send that block completely haywire. And then what you'll see, and we've seen this ourselves because we've tried this stuff, you know, crops where you're at week 9 or something, and the crop should be totally ready and good to go. Yeah. And 50% of the crop is white and didn't do a damn thing. 50% is brown. 50% is already fruiting inside the bag. Whatever. And
unprovoked.
And then regardless, with each of these, you actually feel it and it's squishy.
Yeah.
And that's a sign that there was heat stress and that there was cell death in the core of the block. And there's actually a lot of just dead mycelium in the core of it. And those blocks aren't going to want to fruit.
No, not at all.
So, I mean, the overall moral of the story with the soy shiitake, is it can work really well, but don't take it lightly. Don't treat it as something where you can tolerate
like an equivalent.
Yeah, the same amount of variability as you would with, say, shiitake on wheat middlings or other varieties in general that don't really care as much.
Yeah, some the Masters Mix thing has been awesome for a lot of species, and yeah, it will work, you know, for shiitakes to a certain degree. But I think that there's a moment where it becomes a little too precarious to make sure that it works.
Yeah, I mean, you're, depending on the strain, you're investing anywhere from one extreme end 6 weeks, still a long incubation, all things considered, compared to other stuff.
Yeah.
To 14 weeks.
Right.
Like, you know, that's a long investment. It's a shitload of space. Like, don't fuck it up, you know?
Don't fuck it up. All right, so fruiting these things is pretty simple. I mean, in the sense that, like, they're extremely, they're like fast.
They're easy. They're fast.
Like, what, 6 to 8 days?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Good.
That makes it really difficult for block producers or spawn producers. You kind of have a window to work in, and that's it. And refrigeration to a degree will really be helpful, but not always. So whether you've gotten blocks refrigerated or you're making your own, refrigeration can really be a helpful shocking mechanism. You know, it can be a lot of different things, but it can help you a little bit in terms of longevity of the actual block. Because these things are like 8 to 12 week incubations, you have a lot of blocks. So you have to have like 5 to 10 times more space in order to actually produce a lot of them.
Equivalent amount of mushrooms you get from 20% of that space or what have you.
Right. So they're expensive to fruit. So refrigeration can really come into, you know, the fold if you're trying to do bi-weekly shiitake knocks or something like that. Because you can pace them in over, you know, 14 days or something like that. There's a couple interesting fruiting things over the years, like, you know, insufficiently sterilized blocks. I'm just going to make them look cubish because that's fun. Sort of.
So I like my blocks.
Just to look like a
cube
block. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck it. You know, when you strip the bag off of these blocks and you spray them down with water, you're going to get primordia forming within a matter of a couple days. And it starts out as these little like white heads that then form like brown little caps on them. They're almost like dots in the middle, you know? And then as soon as they do that, you'll start to see them separate from the actual stem and look like little cancer-causing creminis. Oh, can we say that, Paul Stamets? I don't know. Maybe they don't cause cancer. Anyways,
Erik Lohman, 1986, right? It's 2022.
Just die right here. What if I died doing
Shouldn't
this?
have drawn them like
Is this
cubes.
the last thing that I want to do in my life? Is just draw some
that's a
shiitake
bummer, dude.
bugs? Oh, fuck my life. I'm not going to keep drawing them, but basically you're trying to replicate this
Many-eyed cube.
The many-eyed
Like,
cube.
yeah.
Many eyes. Yeah, it goes from like zits to eyes to mini boners.
I'm uncomfortable.
Anyways, that's not really an R. Let's accentuate that R.
At this point, they erupt. Okay. There wasn't much of a point to that.
We're getting delirious after one and a tall boy,
Two
and a tall boy. Pinning in the bag is this interesting thing. Neil does it, KOM.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people did it with 3782 in order to get a better yield.
Yeah.
Because there's higher CO2 in this bag, basically you'll get less pins forming, and thus, if it's well timed, you'll get bigger mushrooms from something like 37.
Yeah, old trick with 82 to get medium caps.
Yeah. It can work with everything else, though. It can certainly work with 3790, JC, KOM. The reason a lot of people do it is it's a little more like foolproof. If one block is slightly underhydrated or something like that, and you're not aware of it, and you don't see as many pins forming, you can rip it out of the bag, soak it, then put it into fruiting, something like that. So it gives you a chance, to really kind of understand where your blocks are at. But after 1 to 3 days of it forming little pins, you want to definitely take the bag away.
You got to go quick, otherwise you're going to have bruised, misshapen caps that aren't. They're going to be all squished and flattened on the tops of the caps and aren't going to develop nicely. Yeah.
Concave, man.
Right. And then you can get bacteria more easily just because it's basically a little puddle.
Right. It's a fucking bummer, dude. Then you don't get those pretty little hairs, the bands of hairs.
Right.
Those things are fucking cool. Anyways, it's a nice little happy shiitake.
Nice hairy shiitake. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
It's like, look at the stem.
It looks like eyes.
Yeah. Jesus,
he can be your friend.
That could be my
friend. Your only friend out here in China.
Welcome to our new studio. It'll change every 3 days.
Yeah, it's getting along real well with the neighbors.
They don't like me.
Okay, so pinning in the bag, that's one
pinning in the bag.
Standard strategy.
Strip the bag, soak them the fuck down, beat the shit out of them.
Right. Right. Let's go through the anecdotal stuff from each of these. So the most common thing still is just moving direct into fruiting without doing a damn thing.
but this is the only species that somehow, anecdotally or not, likes to be shocked.
Shocked in some capacity.
So you got temp, you got water absorption, and you got slapping,
friction,
friction,
romance.
Beat it. Anyways, so you can literally. A lot of people see this in incubation. Actually, we should have mentioned this. What can go wrong in incubation?
Oh,
if your temperature goes down because your AC goes down, or if you bump into a block or move a shelf,
yeah,
all those fuckers will fruit in the bag.
Yeah, each strain might be a little bit more hyperactive than another. If you got more nitrogen in your block, it'll be more likely to do that.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, it's most likely to do it the further along you go. But really, it can happen quite early. It can happen when the block is just like more or less completed buckling.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be at risk at that point.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's something like, as soon as they're brown, that's kind of why you want to, that's my cooler. You just want to get them into fruiting or into a cooler. So we could go into this. It's kind of stupid. It's historical, but older KSS browned outside of the bag shiitake blocks, which were a thing, if you can believe that.
Right.
They were once you had to soak them.
Yeah, because they've browned outside of the bag. They've lost like almost all of their water, and they weigh almost.
Yeah, like a 5-pound block weighed like a pound, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. So you can soak blocks though, which is interesting. So say you couldn't get your moisture content up to that 65, let's say, target range, then you could basically wait to go through the whole stage. So you got to 62, soak it for an hour, put it into fruiting. The other one is beat the fuck out of it. And I don't mean with a baseball bat. It's for show. Anyways, gentle. Just smack it around.
Bunt it, right?
Like, how do you you smack a baby? And it will
with
puke on you too. Yeah, with a baseball bat.
Okay, I understand now.
Do you get it? That is a coat hanger. All right. How uncomfortable. All right. Anyways, don't poke your block. You can if you want to.
These both have in common, usually, if you're not using hot water for some reason, which I don't know anyone who does that, they're both a thermal shock. And this is also, rehydrating a block if that's necessary. It's not going to necessarily enhance yield if your block's still at a really great moisture content. But if you need to up it, this is a great way to go. The thermal shock is what induces the pins. This is violence.
We like violence.
And yeah, funny enough, again, a lot of this is just collections of anecdotes.
Yeah.
What we've seen fruiting blocks and incubating blocks, but it does seem like, different strains respond to varying degrees to these different methods.
Yeah.
Like the JC strain, for example, everyone seems to say it loves getting beat. And it fruits faster and more vigorously if it's beat versus put into a cooler.
Yeah,
and there's farms that do this at a pretty good scale who've seen this. 90 seems like it more so prefers just being in a cooler,
which is a real bitch. But it's a good thing, I guess, at that level.
Yeah, and these all just help induce like a more robust pin set.
Yeah,
can be better for yield and can be better for timing things, so you have mushrooms growing more in sync with each other.
It seems moderately, it's always anecdotal when you show this. It's always one block unbeat, one block beat. Right. One beat is like blasting with mushrooms, one not beat has a few mushrooms on it.
Right.
But then in the grand scheme of things, you're already fucking jostling the shit out of these things when you're putting them on shelves.
Yeah.
The fact is they respond to it. So the thing to really take away from this is don't bump into it in incubation.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. Yeah.
Don't fucking move the shelves.
Yeah.
and don't change the temperature.
Yeah, especially because half the time it won't be noticed.
No.
So provide enough access and wide enough pathways between your shiitake rows that you just minimize the chance that someone who doesn't give a shit if those blocks were being or knocked around is going to do it.
Mark used to call the blocks that were like on the top shelf that would fall. We call them like suicide blocks.
Suicide blocks. Yeah.
Suicide blocks.
Right.
So
Yeah. Suicide
you'll see that though. Like
Yeah.
one of those will crack in half.
Yeah.
And then it will start to like, fruit
Yeah.
in the bag. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's also another form of shock, which is really interesting. And I don't remember who did this first, but we did it on a YouTube video or an Instagram or one of those videos. Basically, we took like a block and we just cut it in half.
Oh, right.
And then we took this block and fruited it side by side. What's interesting about cutting a block down the middle is like it's never going to fruit from here because there's no skin, no browning. So like it's going to want to grow mushrooms from all those sides except for right there. What can happen in like a traditional block fruiting scenario is, you got your shelves and you end up with a bunch of mushrooms that want to form like this. And they don't really want to form on the bottom. Maybe a couple will. But
Yeah, and they're hard to fucking harvest. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to maximize the yield, that's an option. Another option that actually works quite well for people, and this is something that I think a lot of folks do.
Wait,
is flip
what? One thing on that, real quick.
Oh yeah,
is if you are gonna slice them down like you're chopping something.
Yeah,
and not side to side, because there is always, to some degree or another, moisture, like a stratification of water in the block from the top to the bottom. There's, with gravity, going to tend to be a little bit more water at the bottom, and you will notice a difference in terms of your yield from the top half versus the bottom half if you cut horizontally.
Yeah,
you can get more even production out of these two halves if you just slice it down the middle.
Right, just like that. And then this cut side is what flops down.
Right. Yep.
That's what I was going to say is like a lot of people actually take their block and they'll flip it upside down. So if your block incubated your loafy ass brown shiitake like this, with the bag on like that, flip that motherfucker over 180 degrees so that the bottom is now up top. And this kind of like dead-ish part is, or the top of the block is at the bottom of the rack.
Yep.
Because this holds all the moisture over 2 months. It's sunk down. Gravity's a bitch. That's my grandmother. Oh wait, she's dead. Shit. Sorry, Mom. So you're gonna get more mushrooms here. And this is like incidentally what you're doing by like cutting a block in half this way, right?
Yeah, it's the same basic concept there. Yeah, that's what we did at Cascadia, and you would tend to see more, fruits forming across the full height of the block than you would otherwise. Even though you have those big chunks that aren't buckled at all.
Yeah.
Where it connected with the wood slats.
I was gonna say, yeah, it depends on your shelving, right?
Yeah.
Because did he do conduit? What was his shelving?
The incubation was wood.
It was wood racks.
I think there might have been some metal, but it was mostly wood.
Mostly wood. Yeah. So
fruiting was metal.
Yeah, shelves are key. They're kind of important. You don't want like a flat shelf for shiitake. Ideally, you want some strips or something.
Yeah, you minimize that surface area of the block that's connecting with the spot where it's not going to get any light, where it's never going to brown, where you're never going to get mushrooms.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that you're limiting those areas for sure. Especially if you're going to flip it and fruit it. Flip the bitch. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's fruiting. It's really not that hard. Put on a goddamn respirator.
Shiitake's hard to incubate. Maybe the easiest mushroom to fruit.
It's really the only mushroom that like 50% of the work goes into incubation.
Right.
And 50% goes into fruiting.
Right.
In regards to knowing how to handle them.
Yeah.
And I feel like incubation.
They turn quick, but it's not that unique. But
yeah.
I don't know. It's always my thing.
Yeah,
these flat caps,
Right. That's true. Yeah, you definitely want to harvest them when they're sort of a little like still crinkly around the stem, you know, and they're like got just that little rim.
Yeah.
So good.
Yep.
Don't want them to flatten out and form these like saucers, you know, because
Yeah,
then the
there's-
skin is just super fucking thin.
Yep, and it's just sopping with water, and they're gonna rot quickly. And they
Which would
won't-
you rather
won't look good?
I guess I would almost rather eat that. It seems
The way you
space
drew
age.
it, yeah,
Fucked
looks
up,
like an
right?
adventure.
This is like Old Man of the Woods, like
Yeah.
I'm dying.
Like a tree.
Yeah, space age or old man. That is goddamn shiitakes, or as Eric Milligan calls it, shiitake.
She.
The fucking oak mushroom. Are we done?
She. Sometimes I. T. Sometimes another T. A. K. E. Sometimes the. And that's just for good effect. Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't make any crosses in there.
Damn it.
Just said damn it. Damn it to hell!